It's time for our special guest speaker. He is the authority on everything carbon footprinting. He is a professor and fellow of the Institute for Social Futures at Lancaster University. There are rumours that he's so clever he once got 16,000 lines on Tetris before his Game Boy batteries ran out. Please give it up. Open up your brain cells for Professor Mike Berners-Lee.
Yay! Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Hey,
how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Yes, I'm very pleased to be here.
Mate, I'm not going to lie. You're a part of something very, that's blown my mind, that has. I mean, I know it's probably for yourself all in a day's work, but what your company, I think there was a mention of 2 other people as well as yourself, but what the boys have done, I mean, it just blows my mind. This is incredible.
Yeah, they're a really exciting company to be working with. I mean, I'll talk you through in a minute just exactly why this is so important and why we're really, really excited to be working with BrewDog on this. And you know, they are standing to raise the bar for the business world here, and it's long overdue.
All right, fantastic. Well, we won't hold you up, Mike. Take it away and give us your presentation. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, so you know, because I've been working on climate change for 15 years or so, and I've written some books about it and so on. But you know, the more you think about it, the more inescapably clear it became that if you want to start dealing with climate change, you need to see it as a symptom of something even bigger. And so I'm going to start by standing right back and asking, well, what is that thing that's even bigger than climate change that climate change is a symptom of? So here's a little graph just to start us off. So this is a graph of human energy use, and you can see it's been going up there. Actually, it's been going up for millennia, but you know, every year humans have got a bit more energy at their disposal. And the last 50 years, it's been going up at about 2.4% a year. That's pretty quick. That means it doubles every 30 years. And you know, we use that energy for all kinds of great things. It helps us to brew beer and develop technologies and live better in all sorts of ways. But it's also true to say that with that energy supply, we become a more powerful species. And through our use of that energy, we influence the planet that we're living on increasingly by this mixture of accident and design. And that didn't matter for ages, that we were becoming a more powerful species. But gradually, the balance of power between us and the planet has started to shift. And really, really recently, it's shifted completely. And it takes us to an incredibly important moment right now. And just to kind of emphasize how recently that is. So, you know, 100 years ago, humans couldn't smash up the planet, even if we tried. And we did try quite hard. 50 years ago or around there, we had nuclear weapons, and we could, if we were really, really stupid, we could smash the planet up, the whole planet up, make it hostile to live on. Now, we've got so much more powerful since then that we don't have to be particularly stupid. We just have to not be careful enough, and we are smashing the planet up. And as years go by, we're getting more and more powerful again. So suddenly we've reached this era, and some people have a big word for it. They call it the Anthropocene, and it just means the era in which suddenly humans are the big thing that affect the planet that we're living on. We're the biggest thing influencing the planet. And it's a totally new context for humanity to be operating in. Suddenly we're like bulls in a china shop. And it's not surprising that everything about how we do life that's been honed in a previous era, when the world was a big, robust playground for us, may not be fit for purpose anymore. So how we do business, how we do economics, how we think, politics, how we solve problems, what our values are, all sorts of stuff suddenly needs reevaluating. And the things that aren't fit for purpose anymore, we need to change them now. And here in this Anthropocene, we've got all kinds of challenges that are hitting us all at once. And it's no good dealing with climate change over here and biodiversity and wildlife issues over here, and then separately from that, things like inequality over here. You know, and plastic pollution separately over here. You have to join it all up and think about it all at the same time. So, you know, that's why I wrote my last book, There's No Planet B, just to try and put all this stuff together in one book. But it's why it's so important, for example, that when BrewDog talks about planting trees, they're not just talking about planting a whole load of pine trees all the same somewhere. They're talking about a really rich biodiverse space, because actually all these things need managing together. And why right now is such a critical moment is that, you know, we've had a few decades of being in this Anthropocene, but being able to get away with living still as if we weren't yet in it. But right now, we've reached this moment at which, it's clear that if we don't start making huge changes, big systemic changes right across society, we are going to hit the consequences of it really, really hard. And so here we are in this pandemic year. 2020 needed to be a really big year without the pandemic. Now we've had this pandemic, we've been forced into a lot of change, and it's like, if now is not the moment for change, then, you know, when will be? And I want to show this graph just to have a look at our progress, global progress so far on climate change, just to be really, really clear about it. So, you know, the science has been clear for decades, and this is a graph of human emissions from energy use. And if you look at this graph, you can see that it hasn't noticed at all, and I'm choosing my words carefully, it hasn't noticed at all yet that humans have noticed that climate change is a big deal. And I'm not saying this to be depressing. I'm saying that that's because this tells us that the kind of change we've had so far, all the talk about climate change, all the talk from the business community, or even the individuals we know, you know, including loads of people tuned into this right now, who've taken personal action to cut their carbon. None of that has resulted in the faintest dent in that curve yet. And that's because what we need is change at the global system level. What we need is to create a whole global level change, because otherwise the little bits of change that you see just tend to get just absorbed elsewhere. One person cuts their carbon and somebody else raises their carbon as a result. So we need a huge cultural and systemic change. Okay, so what we're up against at the moment is this kind of race between tipping points. So, you know, if you're not getting scared by the science, and it's got a lot scarier since I started working on this, and even in the last couple of years, anyone who's not getting a bit scared by the science, our brains aren't working properly if we're not. So we've got this kind of race between tipping points. So, you know, on the one hand, we've got wildfires. I could have put pictures up here of craters in Siberia where up to 50 meters across, where the methane is exploding out of the ground. And of course, methane's another really powerful greenhouse gas. You know, all kinds of pictures I could have put up, including weather here in the UK, weather changes here in the UK. So on the one hand, things are looking really, quite scary on the climate front. But on the other hand, and this is new in the last couple of years, the evidence that humanity is finally starting to wake up is stronger than I've ever known it by a long, long way stronger than it was 2 years ago. So because the big phenomenon has been, well, why, when the science is so clear, why is whole of humanity asleep on the job here? But, some of the kids taking to the streets, and Greta Thunberg, one of the world's, clearest voices on climate change. And this is the Extinction Rebellion protests. I don't know if you can read that. It's that pink boat in London saying "Tell the truth." But the positivity of those Extinction Rebellion protests, some of them, just absolutely having influence over politics, and I've noticed it a lot, and in my work, over the business world. So the evidence that we're starting to wake up now is way stronger than it's ever been before. But I think we need to say that in the business world, there's been an awful lot of bullshit. Just to be clear about it, there has been an awful lot of denial. There's been seas of greenwash. There's been apathy and fear, and there have been precious few, really very, very few businesses that are really taking action that is commensurate with the scale of the challenge that we need to see. And that is why there is a need for businesses to show some leadership, And that is why we are really, really excited to be working with BrewDog, who my hope is that it's going to be from here on, one of the world's real inspiring businesses. I've talked a bit of doom and gloom about climate change, but I want to say some good news. So I hope you can all see this. This is a map of the world, and don't worry about the words on it, but I just want you to look at this dot here, which is to scale, and it represents the size of all the world's solar panels that will be required to create enough energy to replace the whole of the world's energy supply. And there's a lot of other technical challenges. You've got to make sure that this energy gets to everyone who needs it all over the world. And you've got to make sure that you can use electricity for all the things that we need energy for. And you've got to work out what to do when the sun's not shining and stuff. But if you look at all those challenges as well, it turns out the really good news is that from a technical point of view, they're all solvable, and we can brew great low carbon beer as well, while we're at it, that challenge is solvable as well. So the question is, if this is such a technologically solvable challenge, then why aren't we making the change? Well, it's just about, not enough imagination, not enough leadership, and just not enough pushing for that change. There's just one caveat on this, that I said we're growing our energy supply ever more. And if we keep growing it as fast as we are, in 100 years' time, we'd need 10 dots like this dotted around. And in 200 years' time, we'd need 100 dots like this. And in 300 years' time, the whole of this map would have to be black with solar panels, with no spaces at all for humans to walk around in the sunlight on land, because we'd need it for our energy supply. So the caveat is that we do also need to be careful about how much energy we use. But still, technically, the opportunity is absolutely here for us to live better than ever. So it's kind of frustrating, because it's not as though we're talking about a doom and gloom thing here. And I think the guys at BrewDog have done a great job of making it clear that we're talking about we're pushing for a better world, a world in which we can enjoy our lives more, not less, for sure. A few other things I want to talk through. I mean, in No Planet B, I tried to do a whole talk of all of the kind of a whole tour of all the things that are going on environmentally and socially and economically, and all the technologies that are required, and how the whole lot comes together. But just to pick out another couple of bits, because this is to talk a little bit about the food system, because this is absolutely integral to the whole challenge of humans thriving on the planet. So this is a piece of work we did at Lancaster. It's just mapping out the global food system. And I'm just going to talk through where the world's calories go. Don't worry about the words. I'll talk you through just the pictures. So this green bar here represents the nearly 6,000 calories per person per day of human edible crops that we grow around the world at the global level. So that is about 2.5 times what humans need to eat. And I'm just going to talk through a graph about calories, but we did graphs like this for protein and vitamins and all the essential human nutrients, and they're all pretty similar. You get the same story. So there's 6,000 calories of crops that we grow, and here's another 4,000 calories worth of grass and pasture and stover that farm animals eat that we can't digest, but they can. If you add the two together, it's nearly 10,000 calories per person per day. Humans only need about 2,300. So let's have a look at what happens to it on its journey to our mouths. Well, a bit gets lost in harvest, that's this bit here, and a bit gets lost in storage, and we ought to be able to sort that out, but there's still plenty. But then this is the critical bit. This is where we work out what to do with our food. The yellow bit here, the little slither, that's the bit that we save as seeds and plant them for next year. So that's really good news. This is biofuel, mainly. It's non-food uses, the blue chunk. And what's important about that is that, biofuel is not bad as such, but just to be clear about it, if you had enough wheat to feed me for a day, or any of us for a day, if instead you turned it into biofuel, you could power a little Citroen C1 car with a 1-litre engine for about 1 mile. So that's a really steep trade-off, 1 mile against 1 mile of travel against a whole day's worth of calories. And then this green chunk we keep in the food supply, and this chunk here we feed to animals. And the animals then, they eat this. It's nearly 3/4 of all the food that humans require. They eat this, and they eat this. And they give us back this red slither here, and they use all this up. They waste all this by doing inefficient things like walking around and keeping warm and stuff like that. So this graph just highlights the biggest thing about the food system. If we want to feed everyone in the world and deal with climate change and manage our biodiversity as well and our wildlife, the single most helpful thing we could do is to reduce the amount of meat and dairy that we eat. We don't have to go vegetarian or vegan, but we do have to, over a period of time, reduce the proportions of meat and dairy in our diets, especially here in the UK, by a lot. And the science is really clear on that. And I bring it up now because it's going to be one of the things you'll probably see in some of the BrewDog bars. Is you'll probably see that the non-meat and dairy, low meat and dairy type foods start becoming absolutely delicious. And then just to follow on the story, you know, there are a few more losses on the way, and then we have, at the end of the day, we have more than enough food to eat still. So there's plenty of food, but we can take a lot of pressure off the food system if we just reduce the amount of meat and dairy that we eat. And just one quick slide just to emphasize the point. So here we go. This is comparing soybeans with beef. So 100 grams of soybeans against 100 grams of beef, and you find in green the soybeans have got more calories, more protein, more iron, and more zinc in them than the beef. But you know what? If you feed 100 grams of soybeans to a cow, you don't get 100 grams of beef back. You only get about 10 grams of beef back, and it serves it up with a whole big helping of methane burped up as well, which is a really powerful greenhouse gas. Okay, so a few little bits of science there, and I just want to. What I like to hope is that, you know, when we get our heads around this stuff and more messages beside, it's a bit like going through a gate. You know, going through a gate in an airport or anywhere. You go through a one-way gate. Once you've gone through it, you can't unknow it. So what you find is, you know, it's a one-way gate. You can't, once you've realized this stuff, you can't unknow it. There's no going back. So the question becomes, well, all right then, how are we going to go forwards from here? So let's have a look at that. Well, the good news is, you know, what might we aim for? Well, actually, and we could all imagine this in different ways, and we don't spend nearly enough time imagining a better future. But in terms of, you know, it's not a worse life. If we get this right, the transition to a low carbon and sustainable and Anthropocene fit world is actually an opportunity to live better than we've ever lived before. Probably. We don't actually know. The science is quite uncertain. There's a chance that we've left it all too late. The uncertainty is that high. But as far as we can tell, there's actually a very, very good chance that it's not too late and we can live better than ever before. So, you know, what would this low carbon sustainable world look like? Well, there'll be more sustainable, healthy transport like cycling. There'll be a really great community. There'll be loads of solar panels. We'll all be getting involved in the natural world, maybe planting trees on the BrewDog land. There can be great beer that we drink with people that with our friends. There could be thriving cities and sustainable transport, beautiful trees everywhere. And actually this picture here, I'd change this picture. You know, I'd put quite a few trees on most of this land here so that there are big open spaces, but also plenty of really biodiverse wildlife of every kind as well. So, you know, it's a better world that we can have and a more exciting and fulfilling one. Yeah. Looking at what humans need to do, I said that we need huge transition in the way that businesses work, and BrewDog is taking some very, very exciting steps in that way now. It's going to be challenging, but a very, very exciting start. And you know, I talked about changes to the way we do economics and the way we do politics. I'll touch on little bits of that. But one of the things that I think we need to change, and I write about this in the book, is is, you know, we need to develop some new thinking skills. And this is, I'll just talk through this. I'm not sure you can read it or not, but here are some ways of thinking that we suddenly need to get so much better at now we're in the Anthropocene. Just come right into the camera. So we need to get better at big picture thinking about the whole world and the way all the issues we're facing join together. We need to get better at global empathy because, you know, we're one tribe now. You know, we're stuck on this beautiful planet A that we're living on. And like it or not, we sink or swim all together. So we need to become better at getting an emotional response when we hear about something that affects the lives of people on the other side of the world who come from totally different cultures to ours. Because you know what? These days, you can't so much as make a cup of tea without affecting people on the other side of the world. And we need them to care about us just as much as we care about them. We need to get better at thinking of the future. And, you know, and BrewDog are starting to do this now, but we all need to get better at imagining not only how much trouble we're going to be in if we carry on as we are, but also probably more to the point, how much better things can be if we make the kind of transition that we have to make so urgently. We need to get better at appreciating small things in life that are right in front of our noses. You know, one example of that would be maybe a beer with some great friends. Another example of that might be just getting out into the BrewDog forest and maybe helping to plant some of those trees, or going on a sustainability retreat, or whatever it might be. But we need to get better at getting our kicks out of things that don't require us to get on an airplane and fly to the other end of the world. We probably need to get better at self-reflection and understanding, well, you know, what are the things that stop us making change, and what are the things that would help us to make that change? We need to get better at critical thinking, and we need to get better at joining it all up and thinking about all these issues all at once together, as BrewDog have really been doing over the last few weeks. It's been impressive. And then this next slide I want to show is about, I talked to a lot of technical and experts and scientists in the course of writing There's No Planet B. And you know what? It's funny how many of them said to me at the end of a long cup of coffee, just words to the effect of, well, you know, maybe at the end of the day, it just boils down to, well, what are our values? And so here are 3 sets of values, which I'm just going to put up because I think you can prove pretty well that humans can thrive with these values and they can't thrive without them. And the good news is they are all values that we can cultivate by conscious action. And the other good news is that, you know, they seem to be values that BrewDog is really taking on here. So the first one is just, sounds so obvious, it's just to treat all people in the world as if they have equal value. You know, whether they're black or white, rich or poor, whatever country they live in, whatever. The second one is to extend that valuing to all the other species. So it's not just humans. You know, we need to start respecting the trees. We're starting respecting the wildlife because we can't live without our biodiversity. So it's great that BrewDog's not just putting up monoculture trees, but they're putting up you know, a really thoughtful biodiverse forest. And the third one here is respect for truth. The issues we're trying to deal with here, are more complicated than they've ever been. And to stand a chance, we need the best and clearest view of the truth that we can possibly have. And so we've got to get far sharper at insisting on and discerning when people are telling the truth and when they're not. So just to have a look at some figures here that we all know. So all of us, over a glass of beer or any time or whatever, we just need to get smarter at asking ourselves the question, how would I know whether I can trust these people? And, you know, what is their track record? Have they ever deliberately misled the people? Have they ever deliberately tried to mislead me in any way? And if so, you know, what can I do to make sure that well, for a start, please don't give your vote to anybody who you think is either in the pocket of or or is somebody who has deliberately tried to mislead you over time? And or do we get stuck in putting our trust in people because we like their haircut or the color of their tie or the way they talk or the jokes they tell or whatever? We just need to get much sharper at asking really hard, is this person competent? Are their motivations right? Do they have a track record of being honest? And can I trust them? And I'm showing politicians here, but it's the same with our companies. We need to ask ourselves, much more carefully, when a company comes up with a statement about what it's doing, its environmental stuff or whatever, we need to ask ourselves, can we trust this company? And, speaking as an environmental consultant, I've worked with quite a few companies and I've seen a lot of company statements, and the world is absolutely awash with some desperate bullshit. And so I encourage, BrewDog are saying, well, transparency and honesty is really critical to them and really central to them. And that is such an important principle. And it's one of the reasons why we're so excited about working with it. Okay, I've talked about these global systemic challenges. The last thing I want to talk about is the question of, when it's also global and systemic, what can any of us do? Whether you're a business or whether you're an individual, if you're quite a big business like BrewDog, or whether you're just a person like me or whatever, what can any of us do to help push for the conditions under which the big global systemic change becomes possible? And actually, there turns out to be plenty. And here's what I think it involves. And this applies to each one of us as individuals as much as it does to companies like BrewDog. So I hope you can read this. Step one is to imagine. I've talked about this already. We need to imagine futures that are really worth getting excited about. It's not just about cutting carbon. It's about cutting carbon in a way and finding ways of doing it in which our lives are better, not worse. It's also about getting better at imagining how much trouble we're heading for if we don't make the big transition that we so urgently need to make right now. The second thing I want to talk about is role modeling, because it's one thing to cut our own carbon footprint, but what we can do on the way is to if we find a smart way of doing it, we can do it in a way that takes other people with us. And we don't have to be perfect. It's heartening to hear BrewDog saying they're not going to be perfect. None of us are perfect. I'm definitely not perfect. But if we just role model making the changes that we can, taking strong action, being open about our mistakes and trying to learn from them, then we will take other people with us on the way. And my hope for BrewDog, and what I'm seeing happening now, is that I think they're actually in a position to really raise the bar on the corporate world and say to other businesses, look, this is what it looks like when a company cares about climate change. You take twice the carbon out of the air. You do it in a really environmentally sympathetic way. You make the company better in every way while you're at it. You cut all the carbon before you take the carbon out of the air. You cut all your carbon emissions in the first place as hard as you possibly can, and then you campaign on it, and then you make sure that nobody gets off the hook for disingenuous statements about what they say they're doing on climate change. So that's role modeling, and we can all do that in our lives as well. And at this point, I just can't resist, because in 2 weeks' time, the update of my first book, How Bad Are Bananas? The Carbon Footprint of Everything, after an enormous amount of work, is hitting the shops. And that's got quite a few pages on all of that, how you can cut your own carbon and try and be a role model. Third up, it's cutting our own carbon footprint is one thing, but then there's the question, well, how else can I influence? How can I influence the people around me? How can I influence other companies? How can I influence my politician? How can I make sure that every politician knows I won't possibly vote for them unless they're really doing the right stuff on climate change? And the state of the emergency we're in is such that it's not good. It's not okay now just to let it go if we're in the company of people who are giving us nonsense on the climate emergency. I've talked about developing these skills and values that I've just touched on. That's something we can all do. These last two, I just want to say, you know, it's time to, one more thing on the influencing, which is that every time we spend money, we are pushing for one future or another. So every time we, for example, buy a beer, question is, you know, what supply chains are you supporting? Are you supporting a company that you believe is really pushing for the kind of world you want to see? Or are you supporting a company that is pushing for a different kind of world? And that goes for anything we buy, whether it's clothes or furniture or anything we invest in or just about anything. So that's a critical question to ask, and we're going to be working with BrewDog to help them ask that question of every company that they spend money on in their supply chain. In pink here, you know, just to say about insisting, it really, really is time to insist. We've had decades of asking nicely, and it's got us nowhere. And we have to have the change right now. We don't know whether we've already committed ourselves to some tipping points in the climate system that are going to be very unpleasant for billions of humans. It looks as though if we take very strong action now, we can avoid that, and we can actually treat it as an opportunity to concentrate more on the things that really do add value to our lives, including great beer with friends. But it really is we have to absolutely insist on this change now. And I don't say this lightly. This last one down here about protest. You know, I'm not somebody whose eyes immediately instinctively light up at the thought of, well, goody, let's take to the streets. That'll be fun. But we have to have the change. And if the right kind of non-violent but very insistent protest makes the difference, then that's what we need. And the school kids taking to the streets and Extinction Rebellion at their best with some of their best protests were, I think, some of the most optimistic things I've seen in the last year or two. And it's absolutely clear that they have brought change in the conversations that are going on in the business world, and also change in the conversations in the political world as well, including the ramping up of the UK targets. So there's one for all of us to consider. Is it time for the right kind of protest? So those are my thoughts on it all. And just to summarize, just to say that, you know, I think the business world has been pretty pitiful on balance in its leadership. The whole world has lacked leadership on climate change. The whole business world has lacked leadership on climate change. I think what BrewDog's doing now is genuinely very, very exciting. I think it raises the bar for other companies. And I think it makes a statement about, you know, if a brewery with pubs and bars coming out of a pandemic can take this kind of action this strongly right now, then there's really no excuse for the rest of the business world coming with it too. And I'm hoping they will take, this is really one of the key pieces of leadership that the world so badly needs. So thank you, BrewDog, and I'll be rooting for you and trying to help you as much as I can along the way. Thank you.